Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of Old Scribes with my partner in crime, George Willis. George, how's it going?
It's going well, Matt. Here in Miami, Florida, the weather's always beautiful and getting ready for baseball season coming up. But here to talk a little boxing and a little NFL combine.
All right, all right. So, special guest today got Lance Pugmire, former boxing expert over at the LA Times and the Athletic, now working with PPV.com and Boxing Scene, and the 2023 Nat Fleischer Excellence in Boxing Journalism Award winner. I was at that, by the way, when you won it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Lance, welcome.
Thank you so much, guys. Really a pleasure to be on here with you.
Good, buddy.
So tell us first off a little bit. You know, we're coming off a pretty big fight on Saturday. You know, it was massive event, massive card. First off, you know, there was all this talk about greatest card of all time. You know, it was a great card, but you know, in my opinion, it has a way to go to become the greatest card of all time. There's been some good ones, and the boxing didn't start 10 years ago. So anyway, what did you think of the card?
Look, I thought it was a quality main event. It was a very compelling main event. Dimitri Bivol definitely put his heart on the line to come back in that fight against a vicious slugger and Artur Beterbiev. And the things that he was able to accomplish to turn the scorecards around and really proclaim victory, I thought really speak volumes about who Dimitri Bivol is as a fighter. Remember, this is the guy that knocked off Canelo Alvarez, you know, despite what the scorecards were back then, rather easily back when that happened a few years ago. And now he's got a victory over Beterbiev to boot. So, I mean, impressive guy. Actually won Fighter of the Year the year that I won that Fleischer Award as well. So I think that it was for the entire evening, I think, was more than anything a coronation for Dimitri Bivol. The other fights that took place, I agree with you. Like, did it necessarily live up to the greatest card of all time? No, because like the fights like Joseph Parker was a very quick dismissal of Martin Bacoli, who was like a last minute replacement.
Right.
And then, you know, a coronation that we all expected for the middleweight Hamza Shiraz did not happen. In fact, he was, in my opinion, he was beat pretty convincingly by the middleweight champion Carlos Adames. And the other fights that did stand out, though, that were sensational, not to keep going on this, was the Virgil Ortiz over Israel Madrimov. I thought was very, very entertaining. I spent a lot of time in the gym because he trains out here in Riverside, California. Virgil Ortiz does. And Madrimov's nearby Indio as well. So I do spend a lot of time with both of these guys. And I was really intrigued by that fight. And I thought it lived up to the hype. I hated to see Madrimov talk about that he was sick going into the fight because I felt like Virgil did a lot of things to turn the tables and win that fight himself. And then lastly, the other fight that stood out in my mind was the Callum Smith victory, where the great trainer, Buddy McGirt, gave him one hell of a pep talk that I actually wrote a story on in Boxing Scene yesterday, right before the 12th round, and basically said, "Can you give me 3 minutes?" And it was a pretty epic exchange and a very entertaining fight and very exciting to watch.
Yeah, what I kind of appreciated was I don't know about you, but I go through a little bit of withdrawals when the NFL season is over and the, the weekends and the Sundays don't quite feel the same. So it was really nice to just kind of watch boxing what turned out to be basically all day.
Yeah.
You know, you had a fight card that started fairly early, at least, you know, in Miami, and the fights were on basically all day, and they were entertaining enough to captivate your attention over that span, and it all sort of built up to that main event, which was outstanding. And got a little Shakur Stevenson in there. You didn't mention him, but he did what he had to do. And overall, I thought it was a very enjoyable fight card to watch.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, George. I think that I out here on the West Coast, it started at 7:30. I had just enough time to go grab some coffee in the morning, and I was literally in front of the TV the rest of the day. on ppv.com, and we'll be back again this weekend, by the way, for the Tank Davis Lamont Roach fight at Barclays Center in Brooklyn. But yeah, it was very full day, and I think that I've always said like the worst sports weekend of all time is NBA All-Star Weekend, because it's just so meaningless. And then this weekend that follows is kind of like the close second. So it was great to have something that was so fun to spend our day around the two best sports fans.
It felt a little NCAA tournament ish in that it went all day, and you kind of had to like plan your day and pick and choose, what fights you really had to watch versus the ones, Shakur Stevenson, you didn't really have to watch. So my timing was perfect. My son had a basketball game right in the middle of the Stevenson fight, so I didn't see 1 second of that. So, but it did feel a little bit different for boxing, right? It lasted all day. It, like you said, you got up in the morning. I'm in Chicago, and I still had to have coffee like 10:30. So, it was it was different. It was different, but in a good way.
Yeah, no, they're doing a great job out there with the fights. I mean, obviously, I know there's a lot of talk in the industry about, let's get it while the getting's good, and let's enjoy it while the money is being spent. When is the money going to run out? But I think that's a conversation for another day. Right now, they're making some pretty sensational cards in Saudi Arabia, and we're getting to see a lot of the fights that we want to see. I'm not to be greedy here, but I think that we can all agree that there's still some unfinished business. I'd still like to see Canelo Alvarez versus David Benavidez. If you're spending all this money to make all these fights, let's get the best ones possible. And then additionally, I mean, talk about this weekend that's coming up, and you mentioned Shakur Stevenson. Let's spend the money. Let's bring Tank Davis out there, and let's make a Shakur Stevenson versus Tank Davis fight as well. Again, that's just me being greedy. I know that they're doing a lot of great things out there to stage a lot of these massive fights that we have waited several years to take place.
I know it almost feels a little bit like when PBC was getting started, and Al was spending a lot of money, so supposedly had this big bankroll and was collecting all the fighters, and all these big fights were supposed to happen. So hopefully, it's starting out pretty well when you get two fight cards back to back like this. That kind of elevates the sports, because people start paying attention when you have a lot of continuity and consistency in big fights.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other guys, the other promoters are, let's give them some credit. They're doing their part. I mean, like I said, this weekend's card in Brooklyn with Tank Davis headlining it. Tank actually wanted some other guys. He wanted to fight Lomachenko. I think that he was somewhat interested in fighting Shakur, but there were some circumstances going on where Lomachenko decided to take a break, and then he injured his shoulder in training. It delayed that. And so really, I mean, he said, okay, give me a champion. He's taken the super featherweight champion, Lamont Roach, which is kind of like a regional battle, because one's from Baltimore, one's from Washington, D.C. And I'm sure there's going to be some good verbal back and forth this week. But let's be honest. I think we all expect Tank Davis to end this night in a pretty convincing manner.
You mentioned Canelo, and you mentioned some other fights that Tank was looking for other opponents. With Canelo, it doesn't really seem like he's looking for other opponents. It looks, it's pretty obvious he doesn't want to fight Benavidez for whatever reason. I don't think it's a reason of like being scared or anything like that. I think they're probably monetary, and they're, why fight someone that tough when you can get, fight William Skull for, same amount of money, or, Terrence Crawford, who's 2 or 3 pound, weight classes below him. What do you think? I mean, do you think that he'll ever fight another meaningful opponent again? I'm not even completely convinced that he'll fight Crawford.
Oh, yeah. Look, I mean, that's a great question. I know that I think Turki Al-Sheikh said if it wasn't on Sunday, it was on Monday, that the idea is to stage a fight next year between Canelo and the winner of the upcoming, I think it's in April, Conor Ben fight against Chris Eubank Jr.
Yeah.
And so again, that's another fighter who's going to be moving up weight class to take that bout. And then look, Canelo has a 4-fight deal with Turki Al Sheikh. I think looming out there, in the finale, could it be a rematch with Dmitry Bivol? I mean, Canelo has said he has expressed more interest in fighting the rematch with Bivol than he has in fighting Benavidez. So maybe that's the fight that he ends this 4-fight deal with. And that's a hell of a test if he's going to take that. I agree with you. I mean, look, the matchup that was there and ripe for the taking was the Benavidez fight. I know Canelo had a lot of concerns for sure about how big Benavidez could become when he rehydrates. And then I also think that Canelo, wants to be respected as well. And the Benavidez camp said some things that really kind of like chafed him. Should he be better than that and like sort of turn his ears away from that type of criticism and those comments? Yes, but you know what? He is the face of boxing, and he has the opportunity and to take whatever stand he wants. And if he's subjected to criticism by the fans, then the fans can let him have it. But from what I've seen and going to several years of fights in Las Vegas, is that the fight fans love when it's Canelo fight week, and it doesn't really matter who he's fighting anymore. We just saw this last year when he fought Jaime Munguia and Edgar Berlanga, which I thought he was going to get crucified over, and he didn't because there was a great turnout. So if the fans are fine with it, like all we can do is say like, hey, this is not the ideal fight for him, but it's still a major event, and Canelo is the gravy train.
Yeah, I think that's sort of Floyd, not so much Floyd, but Oscar had that sort of thing, but he was able to always put a big fight together with an opponent that always raised a lot of intrigue, even though his fights were events too. I mean, it really didn't matter towards the end who he fought, but he didn't take on a lot of softies down toward the end of that. And so it's like a little bit different. I mean, he could have fought softer opponents, but when you're fighting Bernard Hopkins and people like that, that's reaching up there a little bit.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think that Canelo Alvarez has kind of scripted, or for whatever reason in his mind, he's kind of scripted, this is the way I want to go out, and I'm content to do it, even if I'm going to hear some of the catcalls that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like Canelo can kind of thank Oscar, just because Oscar established that kind of, Cinco de Mayo, Mexican Independence Day. He established those as huge events, regardless of who he's fighting. But Oscar was actually fighting huge names and very tough opponents, which, Canelo isn't. He's kind of riding the wave of the event, but not necessarily fighting the tough opponent.
Yeah, and now those, a couple of those events are now going to Saudi Arabia as well. So that's an interesting move, because it does create a void here in the U.S. for someone to fill in for him on some of these landmark weekends. Like, we know that there's conversations, and I think they're getting very close on this, guys, for Naoya Inoue, the great fighter from Japan, the 4-division undefeated champion who's undisputed as a super bantamweight champion, to make that move and headline what will be a third Cinco de Mayo weekend card. You talk about the full slate of weekend action that we just had in Saudi Arabia. Now we're going to have Times Square with Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney on separate cards on May 2nd. Canelo Alvarez defending his belt and trying to become undisputed again at super middleweight in Saudi Arabia, and then come end the weekend with Naoya Inoue fighting a Mexican fighter in the main event of the Cinco de Mayo evening card in Las Vegas. So, get ready for more boxing, and some of it is pretty compelling stuff too, especially the Garcia and Haney doubleheader, as both of those guys return to the ring.
Yeah, my next question was actually going to be: is boxing in the U.S. in a little bit of trouble? But judging by that weekend, no.
Right. Look, look, they've lost some talent for sure. I mean, I had a big problem. I wrote some critical words of taking a card like the Golden Boys Latino Night in November and putting it in Saudi Arabia. It makes no sense other than you're just trying to build a bond between Golden Boy and the Saudis. I guess I do get that, but that was a fight that was so ripe to take place. I mean, we're seeing great events taking place in Phoenix right now. We've
Yep.
had Bam Rodriguez go through there, and a couple other guys. We just had Navarrete as
Mhm.
well fought there. Phoenix is becoming a real hotbed market, and then we know what LA provides as well. So Vegas as well. That Latino night card could have gone to either of those locations, and it would have been sensational. I just feel like it lost some of its zest by taking it to Saudi Arabia. So I think this is a work in progress. I hope that, and I believe that they will figure it all out as to what fight belongs where, what fights belong where. But yeah, I mean, America, let's be honest, America and the UK are such strong markets for this sport. And yes, I understand that they're trying to get traffic and people to embrace the idea of tourism in Saudi Arabia. But they can still do that. They can still make that point while staging some of these fights here in the US.
Yeah, it's really hard to replicate. I mean, and I know, and I think Saturday uh, they moved the fight from the giant arena to the smaller arena, right? Just for the reason because there had been a lot of criticism about just the lack of atmosphere that was going on in Saudi Arabia. It didn't seem to have anywhere near the kind of electricity that it has here. It's going to be very difficult to replicate that kind of fervor that you would get in Phoenix or LA or San Antonio or Dallas or wherever halfway across the world.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that like they gave us some static because we had one of the first stories on that whole issue of moving the fight into the smaller venue. But it's like I know there was a soccer event in the bigger venue, but hey, you touted this as the greatest fight card of all time. Are you really telling me that a soccer event has nudged this event to a smaller arena? No, they did it. I think they did it first and foremost to try to make it sound a lot better in there. And then it was entertaining. It was a great fight card. Like we went over, there were some quality fights in there. No one is trying to criticize the quality of action that they are scheduling over there. It's just that it would be great if we had those aesthetics to really back it up. And I think that that's here in the U.S., that's in the U.K., and maybe some of the other locations that they have in mind to take this great sport.
Right. I think, like you said, it's a work in progress, and it's good to see all the promoters kind of sitting there with each other watching the fights. I saw Oscar and Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn, and so you've got at least the promoters in the same area. For too long, it would be a top-ranked fight, no other promoter would show up, or it'd be a Golden Boy fight, no other promoter would show up. At least now they're all kind of working together and trying to put these fights together that people want to see. And I think at least that's headed in the right direction.
No, it's a great thing for the sport, George. And I mean, when you talk about the things that they've already done with Frank Warren versus Eddie Hearn in the 5 versus 5, and then there's talk of doing the same thing with Oscar De La Hoya versus Eddie Hearn, and those guys are already kind of chirping at each other. I think this is good stuff. I mean, I know you've been in the same boat that I have. Heard how many years did we spend saying you guys need to work together for the betterment of the sport? The sport was
Mhm.
languishing without these cross-promoted fights that needed to take place. And say whatever you want about Turkey Al Sheikh taking some of these fights to Saudi when they belong here. The guy has made these fights a core fights that would have never taken place before, and I think that that's a huge thing for the sport. That does help um, better market the sport and give us the fights that we're where everyone can say, "Did you see that fight last night?" And it
Mhm.
really did live up to the hype. So many times we've had bouts where we're like, okay, we can basically predict the guys on the left side of the sheet are going to win every single fight,
Mhm.
and there was no cross promotion, no one really putting a lot of risk for their fighters. Now these guys are taking these chances. A loss is not a death sentence to anyone's record, and we have the opportunity to see these guys time and time again, and they're quality fighters.
Amen.
How do you think Inoue will do in Vegas in terms of popularity, in terms of people showing up? How do you think he'll do?
I think the sooner they announce it, the better, because it'll give a lot of the Japanese fans the opportunity to book their trips to come over and spend some time in Vegas. In a way, I know I work for Pro Box and boxing scene as well, and we had one of our talent was the former champion Tim Bradley, and he said Inoue needs to come over here and fight. And Inoue says, no, I don't. Not when I'm selling out 55,000 people in the Tokyo Dome. But let's be honest. I think that a little bit of this he has bought into, because he's got a deal now with Turki Al-Sheikh to go over to Saudi Arabia, and I believe he's going to fight there in December. And then he's going to be coming here in May to fight this like I said, this Mexican #1 rated guy, Alan David Picasso. And look, I think it's going to be a showcase fight for Inoue. We know that he's the monster. We know how devastating his punches are, and how powerful he is, and just how skilled he is. I mean, even in the fight where he was knocked down, he came back in such a furious way. He's so entertaining, and I think he's a worldwide phenomenon. And now he's got the opportunity to be this global star by spreading his wings and coming over here and then going to Saudi Arabia. I think it's a great thing for his brand as a guy that probably will try to become a 5-division champion in 2026 by moving into the featherweight division as well, which is pretty loaded.
With him fighting Alan Picasso Romero, do you expect him to paint another masterpiece?
Yes, I think so. Yes, when I saw Picasso was named, believe me, I was writing the headline for my story, and I was like, it was like cheese on steroids, But yeah, you're absolutely right. It has the ability to do that and so much more. It will be his piece de resistance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think him coming to the United States would just be a show. I think it's going to be a tremendous event. I think all his people are going to come out from everywhere to watch him fight, and that's just going to be great for boxing. I think it's just huge if he comes.
Cinco de Mayo belongs in Vegas. I mean, say what you want to say. I mean, it's a great. You've been to many of these fights, George and Matt, and you guys have seen this. I mean, it's just a very festive occasion, and I think that look, everyone works so hard during the year. It's like a perfect break to just come out and have a good weekend in Vegas and enjoy yourselves. And I'm glad that there's the opportunity to do so with it being hooked to a pretty major fight.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
And I'm glad that it's happening, because I mean, there was so much. I guess there did come a point where you're like, wow, is boxing just drying up in this country, right? I mean, because there's so much going on in Saudi Arabia, and so little happening here, especially toward the end of last year, and you're like, wow, is everything moving over there? But it is nice to know that there's this huge weekend coming up, on a weekend that we've grown accustomed to celebrate as fight fans.
Yeah, and I think part of what you're talking about, it seemed like PBC kind of like eased off the gas as the year closed, but they're sort of like back with a vengeance. They've got this Gervonta Davis card coming up on pay-per-view, and then they follow that with the return of the new 154-pound champion, Sebastian Fundora, who's a unified champion. He's going to be defending his belts I think it's March 22nd. And they'll be busy after that as well. So I think that all the promoters, I know Top Rank has a couple, 2 or 3 cards between the close of March and early May as well. So those guys are staying busy. I think everyone's kind of putting their best foot forward, seizing the momentum of what's out there and the chatter that is out there, the buzz that's out there because of these big fights in Saudi Arabia.
What do you know about Top Rank's contract with ESPN? Is that almost up?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some reports that it's over. I've been in contact with some individuals who say they describe it as, one of the worst kept secrets in boxing, that this relationship is over. I know that Bob Arum is saying that there's still an opportunity to try to have some kind of connection with ESPN, and maybe that will happen. Maybe it won't. You know how everyone likes leverage, George, as you know. So I think that part of
Mhm.
this could be a leverage to get other deals done. I had heard the fact that that Top Rank would love to have their fights on Turner, whether it be um, um, TBS, TNT on the over to cable, and then also have the ability to stream some of these fights. So exactly the way it plays out. I mean, Pro Box TV also streams a lot of fights, so maybe they would steer some of their more of their fighters over our way, which has been a great form that's been very well received by the fans because they like the depth of 50-50 fights that Pro Box founder Gary Jonas has made. So there's a lot of great opportunities for Top Rank, but let's be honest. I mean, it hurts for the boxing to be leaving the worldwide leader in sports. It was a great opportunity, and I know behind the scenes there's a lot of criticism, like how could you guys blow this opportunity? How could you guys let this happen and let this get away? How it all pans out is right now. I mean, I just had conversations today. It's still in
Mhm.
flux. They're working on it, and hopefully, again, for the sport's sake, the broadcast forums for the sport are still very strong and accessible for what we've seen from some of these pay-per-views in Saudi Arabia. The expense has gone way down, right? So
Mhm.
let's hope that the sport remains very accessible for all the fans so they can see all these fights that can and will be made.
Is it important for the sport to, not that it's even possible, to do, but there used to be, Top Rank Boxing, USA Tuesday Night Fights, a regular thing where people, it was so visible, right? And now it's just very sporadic in terms of where it is and when you can catch it. Would anything like that be possible anymore? You think?
Well, I mean, you're getting these fights, from Saudi Arabia. I mean, the staple is almost monthly or bi-monthly pay-per-views that are available to the American audience. Not to again boast about the company I work for, and you guys can take it, for what it's worth. But if you look at the Pro Box TV cards that are being staged on Wednesdays and Fridays in some cases, those are great opportunities for the fight fans to see some of these guys who are trying to move their way up the ladder. And I think that those that's what we used to see back in the days, right? That's what those fights used to be, whether it was Showbox or some of the the Wednesday night fights that we would have back in the day, back in our time, as old Scribes, where all those guys were kind of like moving up the ranks, and it was a great
Mhm.
opportunity to say like, hey, is this guy going to make it or not? This is where I can find out. And so when yes, those opportunities do exist. You would hope that even more of them will exist. But like one of the big players in this, guys, is actually Jake Paul. He just announced a
Mhm.
card in his most valuable promotions. Just announced the card up in Canada, and he's put a lot of support behind prospects and um, showcasing people who are on their way up and fighters who are. I sat in on one of the cards while I was covering the WBA convention down in Florida in December, and it was an entertaining evening. I mean, you had some professional debuts from really decorated amateurs, along with some other fighters like a guy like Lucas Body, who had one probably the knockout of the year this last year as well. And this is a good thing. This is a good thing for the sport because I think that we want to know. I get this question a lot from boxing lifers. Like who's the next big thing? Who's on their way up? I mean, it's not going to happen unless you are sort of tending to this grassroots level that these guys are working pretty diligently on, and even the established promoters. Like I covered a fight recently in Anaheim, California, here with Oscar Duarte as the main event.
Mhm.
Oscar De La Hoya had a lot of his great inspiring prospects on that card, and it was very encouraging to see because these guys are so enthused about what their prospects are, and really look like they have a lot of talent and can rise steadily up that ladder to become perhaps the next stars of the sport.
That's awesome. Well, we also have the NFL Combine weekend. So I thought I'd give you two Charger fans a little bit of a go as to what you think your team might need. You're coming off a pretty good, surprisingly good season. So what do you think? What do you think? What do you think the Chargers are looking at?
I mean, I want to hear what your thoughts are, Matt. But I think that I would love to see them continue to shore up the offensive line if they can.
Yeah.
I think that really bit them in the playoffs against the Houston Texans. Of course, they had a great running back, a great performance from their running back this year. But I wouldn't mind them maybe doing a little bit more. And I think that the biggest thing for the Chargers is maybe not even the draft. It's just that they have so much cap space. They can go out there and fortify some of the other things they need, because I think the most glaring hole that they're going to fill through is going to be through free agency, and that's going to be wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And also too, I don't know, just a rumor, but I heard that they were going to release Joey Bosa.
Yeah.
Who, is oft injured. He's hardly, I don't know. He did play a lot there at the end of the season. But man, it's just, I couldn't understand why they got rid of Mike Williams and Keenan Allen and kept him. Right? I could not understand that. But yeah, I think we've heard Devontae Adams the last few days, right,
Yeah.
in terms of a receiver. But I'm with you. I think offensive line, defensive line, I mean, you can't go wrong. And that's what they need. And especially, like you said, in that Houston game where everything just kind of fell apart. Yeah, they need, obviously, they need more of a foundation, more than they need skill position players, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's with Bosa, it was just one of those situations where it never really hit. Like he could leave and go to San Francisco and join his brother Nick and be very successful. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. But with the Chargers, it was just, I mean, when you reflect upon his tenure with the Bolts, it's like you're not smiling. It wasn't a lot when you think about that playoff game when he took off his helmet and everything like that. It was just.
Yeah.
There was a lot of things, whether it was injuries or that, where you're like, this guy did not play like a superstar that he was supposed to become. And I know he's good, but if he leaves and the Bolts bring in someone else who's a quality player, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, same. It reminds me a little bit of, I mean, because, like you said, Bosa could go to another team and, make it to the Pro Bowl or whatever, you know what I mean? But it reminds me a little bit of Drew Brees in that, in San Diego, he just, for whatever reason, it just didn't turn over for him, right? It just didn't. When he left, I was ready for him to leave and ready for the Rivers era, right? I never dreamed, especially with that injury, that he would go to New Orleans and do what he did. But I think that had a lot to do with Sean Payton.
Yeah. Well, that's the snake bit history of the Chargers, of course. So I do feel it turning with Jim Harbaugh, because I think the best thing that the Chargers did last year was to hire Jim Harbaugh, and their general manager obviously has proven to, on the heels of a pretty good draft, to know what he's doing as well. So I'm encouraged by that, because what this team needed more than anything was leadership and someone to toughen up this team and get them to the playoffs in a year that they probably didn't expect to reach the playoffs. And
Right.
Now they have all this salary cap room. I'm very excited to see how they kind of like fill in those holes, and to listen to all of these reels where Jim Harbaugh is talking to the team. It's just like, this is exactly what the doctor ordered for this team, and I'm encouraged to see what's going to happen. I'm not sure how much the combine is going to really alter and change this team, but I think that these guys have made all the right decisions so far. So I think that they'll be looking at the right things when they're out there. It's going to be very interesting with all the things going on with quarterbacks and some of those picks up top as to how this all plays out and how these draft boards change based on what happens during this combine.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a real, interesting draft. The way, even from the first pick, a lot of times everyone knows who the first pick is going to be, and they start from there. But first pick could set the tone for the entire first round, this year. Of course, my Raiders are starting over. Nothing new there. But I listened to their general manager today, Spytek, and he seems to be a guy who's thank God sounds like a pretty good football guy, because you're starting to get the analytics people starting to breed into it. My God, the Jaguars GM, what's his name? James Gladstone. He looked like he was 12 years old up there at the podium today. And he sounded to me like all these 30 something baseball executives that have popped up over here. I know Miami's got one, and the way they answer questions is just mind-boggling. Well, we're going to look at the landscape and technique and the culture, and it's all just speak.
Like LinkedIn speak, right?
Yeah, it's like, do you guys know football? I mean, football's a game where you need experience and people who play the game. You can't just read a book and be pretty good in data and put a team together in football. But good luck to them. Let's see what happens. But I like Pete Carroll bringing a little bit of stability finally to the Raiders. He's a young 70s guy, so I think he's not looking for the door or anything, and he'll have some stability there. And I hope Brady has an influence on what they do at quarterback, because I think he'll be able to stop this flow of bad quarterback play that we've had basically since Gannon left.
Yeah. And what a team that you covered for so long, I think, is another key player, George. The Giants. What are they going to do?
Exactly. I mean, they have a lot to make up for. It's tough when coaches and general managers are going into something like that, knowing their jobs are on the line and they have to be perfect and get it right, because they have to build a team. They do have some pieces now. They got neighbors, but they got to solve that quarterback situation, and how they go about it is going to be very interesting.
Absolutely.
So, Lance, before you go, I want to talk to you a little bit about how you started in journalism. How'd you become interested in writing for a living?
Yeah, I was actually I just signed up for community college out of high school, and I literally was like going down the list of potential majors, and I said, well, one thing that I know, because I won the spelling bee in my school, I'm like, one thing I know I can do is spell and write. And so I like the idea of journalism. I saw journalism and I'm like, I can write. I mean, back then it was like, I think it's still an admired profession, but it was a well-paying profession as well. And I'm like, I can make something about of myself with this. And so that's what I committed to, and had the good fortune of, I think we're the result of where we land and the people we deal with. I ended up at a very high quality college newspaper at Cal State Fullerton. One of my colleagues on the staff was a guy you guys probably know from the NBA, Mark Stein, and our journalism coordinator, a guy by the name of Jay Berman. We're just so enthusiastic about covering the news and attending to your writing and how to write the best story and how to get the most out of the people you talk to. And for me, it was like such an amazing blessing. I've had unbelievable good luck in my career. It's almost like whether it's getting the interview or finding the right people to talk to, and filling the holes that I needed for whatever story I'm working on. I'm repeatedly lucky, so I'm just so thankful for this opportunity. And I've just tried to follow the path. I ended up at the whether it was getting promoted from a small paper in Ontario, California called the Daily Bulletin, getting promoted from there to the Los Angeles Times, and then covering the various different sports that I've covered throughout the time. It's been a great journey, and I'm so lucky and thankful that I've been on it.
How did you get into the boxing beat?
Yeah, so in boxing, I was actually covering. When I got hired by the Times, they put me as an investigative reporter, and the actual head of the paper, this guy Dean Baquet, who ended up becoming the editor of editor of the New York Times, said this guy needs a little bit more, chops to his investigative. So we're going to put him in news. They put me in news, covering basically police and courts for 3 years. And after that stint, as that stint was ending, I got a call back from sports by the sports editor, Randy Harvey, who said, look, I think we can bring you back. Our boxing reporter, Steve Springer, is going to be writing the autobiography with Oscar de la Hoya. And obviously, we can't have a writer be in business with a major promoter / fighter and cover boxing for us. He knew that I had spent a lot of time at the smaller papers covering Sugar Shane Mosley out my way in Pomona, California. And he said, look, I'd like you to cover boxing. And he said, I want to adhere you to a beat, because that's when like buyouts and layoffs were starting. He's like, I want to get you on a beat so you're not like caught in this game of musical chairs and get laid off. So cover boxing for Springer. Springer will do some other things. And then I want you to cover this new sport that's out there, the UFC. And the LA Times really became like one of the first major newspapers to cover the UFC on a full-time basis. And that was such a great experience as well. I covered the UFC from 2006 to 2019. Those were really the glory years of the sport when you talk about all the characters and personalities that were connected to the UFC at that time. So great experience with Conor McGregor, Ronda Rousey, and Khabib, and George St. Pierre. So like I said, I've been really fortunate and lucky to be around all of these great people and personalities that have really made the stories that I'm writing about resonate so fully to the Southern California audience.
That's awesome. Would you have rather like stayed on one beat for your 25 years or so, or would you have rather have done the multiple sports that you've been able to cover?
I really loved the investigative side of it. Actually, I had a 1-year run basically at USA Today. I went from the LA Times. I got an offer I couldn't refuse from The Athletic, and spent 2 years there. But it coincided with COVID, and they had to make some tough financial decisions along the way. So that ended my time there. And then I went to USA Today, and USA Today started me as like a sports gambling reporter, because that was something that I had done a lot, covering the fights and being out in Vegas a lot. I connected myself to a lot of the key players in that industry as it was becoming legalized across the country. So that was cool. But then by the end of that, they made me like a full-fledged sports investigative reporter again. And I was loving it so much. I was like, oh, I'm back to what I truly love to do, because I can do any sport at any time, and just kind of sink my teeth into a big story. So to answer your question, like that's my favorite thing of all time to do, is to just, because you don't have, I think, George, you know this, when you're on a beat, I'm not saying you have to step off the gas a little bit, but it's not like you can really like go for the jugular of a story, because you're dealing with these people like every single day. I know like my former late colleague, TJ Simers, was like a master at this. He didn't care. He didn't give an F. He would just go after them and show his face the next day, and dare them to make a move on him. I'm not exactly like that, so like I enjoyed that part though, where I being an investigative reporter, it's like I don't have to compromise myself at all. I can just go for the jugular of the story, write the story that needs to be written, and then move on to the next story.
True.
That's awesome. That's great.
You don't have to necessarily come back and talk to and interview someone the next day, right?
I'm one and done. See you guys later. Talk to that guy. Yeah.
Well, all right. So we got big pay-per-view fight on Saturday. Tank versus Roach. Any prediction on that?
Look, I really think that you're going to see Tank Davis shine, because I think he he probably has to realize that he potentially has a very good, important year ahead of him. I mean, you've got Shakur Stevenson basically calling him out. He's got the fight that he can revisit with Vasily Lomachenko. And a very young champion, Keyshawn Davis, is also saying, hey, I wouldn't mind getting in the ring with this guy. So for Tank Davis, he has so many options, both at lightweight and 140 pounds. I think this is an opportunity to just, turn in a destructive performance and really kind of set his year up to be very special. Because look, we're seeing and hearing things about very strong ticket sales at Barclays Center. It's all about Tank Davis. The fans love this guy. He's a great personality. He's authentic. He's rugged, and he packs a hell of a punch. And if there's one thing that sells in the sport, it's knockouts. I'd also keep an eye on Jose Rayo Valenzuela. He's the new 140-pound champion who just dismissed Isaac Pitbull Cruz August 3rd in Los Angeles. And now he's going to be making the first defense of his title against a tough customer in Gary Antoine Russell, a guy who was basically 21-0 with 21 knockouts before he lost a split decision in his last fight out. So Rayo is a great boxer, a very sharp boxer, very skilled, knowledgeable guy, and I think both of those fights will be very entertaining. And again, I'll be calling the action on ppv.com in our live chat, which is our main host of that is the great Jim Lampley from HBO. It's been a great experience to work alongside him. Jim is just such a great wealth of information, and I think that the fans that want to watch the pay-per-view can go on ppv.com and engage in that live chat with us. And we love, you know how it is, George and Matthew, you guys sit there and you write your story and you don't have anyone to really talk to. This is like writing feedback from the people who are watching the fight along with you. I just think it's a great opportunity to engage with the fans, and I know that Jim loves it as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we had Jim on here, and he talked. We talked about that back before one of the fights. I'm going to go on there myself this week. I'm up pounding away on Twitter. You know what I mean? But I'm going to join you and check it out.
Great, thank you so much,
Lance. Thanks a lot for joining us. You're a great writer, and credit to boxing. And I remember seeing you when you won the award with your family. It was great. It was great and well deserved.
Thank you so much. I appreciate those kind words. And the guys, I think the world of you guys as well. Thank you. Keep up the good work out there.
All right. Okay. Travel safe and have a great time in New York, and tell everybody hello for us.
We will, for sure. We'll miss you.
All right.
See you later.
Bye-bye.